Hello and welcome, family, to another episode of Wake Up Africa. My name is Dr. Mumbi Saraki. How are you doing? How's everything going? I really do pray that you are well in all your ways and that you're moving into living life a truly family on your own terms. We really want to thank every single person that has subscribed to the channel. Thank you so much as well for supporting us on Patreon and with your love donations through PayPal, which enable us to continue to bring you the different perspective on the news, because, you know, it's so important, family, that we start to put these global narratives through our own filters, through our own, translate it into our own narrative. And it reminds me of this thing that I was told before I get into the story. One of the great seers who I had the opportunity, or great prophets who I had the opportunity to learn from back in the day, she told me one thing that I've always carried with me and that I really want to start, moving even more in that vibe of. She was like, if you ever get a negative dream or a negative prophecy about someone, don't rush to tell them if you're not going to give them a solution. If you don't have a way out for them, if you don't have a response to that, then don't tell them, because you're just adding fuel to the flames. It's better you just pray for them in the background. And that's how I feel with our news. If we're going to share is what Babylon is telling us is happening to our people, the destruction, the tragedy that pulls us into this low vibration of pain and anguish and anxiety and frustration and anger and, just the same old vibe, then we shouldn't share it at all. But we should share things that expand our thinking of the circumstances, because you see, there's what the world is telling us is happening, what different nations are telling us is happening versus what is really going on. And we have to learn now to share how we see the circumstances and the events around the world happening according to our perspective. That's how we create our own narrative, family. And of course, I'm talking about the Malila massacre, which continues to draw a lot of criticism and backlash for both Spain and Morocco. And the Spanish president or prime minister, whatever he is, he's actually come under heavy attack for some of the comments that he made. But the one thing that he made that I want us to pay attention to, one of the comments that he made that I wanted us to pay attention to, is he called it an assault, a violent assault, and an attack on the territorial integrity of Spain. He saw it as an invasion, and that's how, family, they are seeing the migrants who are relocating from, Africa for whatever engineered poverty, whatever engineered war, whatever foreign. It's like the snake is eating itself, or dog eat dog world. So they're escaping Africa because of the circumstances and situations that Europe has helped to create and is a part of, to go to Europe and kind of create their own culture, their own vibe. And if you've lived in Europe and interacted with some of our migrant brothers and sisters, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, they are freaked out by the number of young African men who move to Europe. They see it is an invasion, family. I'm talking about when I lived in Switzerland, maybe, 5-something years ago, almost 10 years ago. It was already something that was noticeable. And what would happen, because we used to interact with our brothers. They were the main suppliers of the good herb. So what happened when I was living in Switzerland, for example, is our African brothers would come from Senegal, from Gambia, from Gabon, from Sierra Leone. And because, I was in Geneva, which is a French-speaking, a lot of the French-speaking countries would also come. And they'd come and they'd sell ganja, and they'd trade in money, they'd, send parcels back home, they'd do all kinds of business. They would make hundreds of thousands, family, of Swiss francs, of dollars. And they would go back and they would build these mansions, they'd buy this land, they'd take their children to school, they'd do all these things. And then when the money finished, they'd come back, and et cetera, et cetera. And then, as but they were always looking for the status, what status to be in, because some status was more favorable than others. So many of them would arrive as asylum seekers, as refugees, and that would give you maybe a year or two where you could run your thing and make your money. But after that, the only other way to stay would be to get pregnant, get a woman pregnant, marry a local woman, marry a Swiss woman, get her pregnant, have your children. And so a lot of them would opt for that, thinking they'd be able to maintain their business. But there would always be a clash, family. And eventually, they'd be forced to work in factories and do this and do that in order to meet the child support and be these regular, because Mzungu, there's so many dynamics to that story. But basically, when you were looking at it, because at that time I was a UN worker, and when I was looking at the scenario, you could definitely see all these young, handsome African men coming into the society, marrying these women, having the children, and changing culture. Getting their papers, now calling themselves Swiss, buying land, and starting to shift the racist culture, family. And it was an invasion of sorts. They may not have come with their guns and their, bombs, but they culturally came and shifted the energy of those cities. And that's why this negative, super negative narrative was developed against refugees and these super hard European policies, because they already, family, there's research. These guys have even done research. And it's not only Africans who are moving there, but they fear our bloodline the most. But the research has shown that I think by 2030 or something very soon, in a couple of decades, Europe will be brown. North America will be brown, predominantly. The Mzungu will be in the minority. So they take this as an invasion. And when I look at it spiritually, it's like, the spirit of the motherland is fighting. We may see it as each individual story. This man went and did this young man went and did that. But not only are they, and it's not a good thing, because they could be at home enjoying their gold, enjoying their minerals, which are their inheritance, their rightful inheritance, instead of Europe enjoying it, etc., etc. But this has almost been seen, and we can see through the Spanish Prime Minister's words, as a silent invasion, as an affront of the territorial integrity. It's shifting nations, they fear it. And the thing that they fear the most, family, is the children who are mixed blood. Because when they're born into these societies, they are, they grow up with a lot of racism, being treated like they are African. And then when they grow up, they have all the rights of the other European children. But now, they've been turned into, rebels, fighters for the cause. Because some of the biggest demonstrations you'll see for most of the exploitation that's happening from Europe to Africa happens in Babylon, happens in Europe. Most of the exposés come from Europe. Although Africa, we also have our own exposés. But family, it has shifted culture. And a lot of the children that were had in the 90s and the 2000s are now coming into adult age, where the society has made them feel black, whether they love, whether there was conflict with their African father or mother or whatever, whether they grew up with them, whether they grew up separated, whatever. It makes them feel more connected to their African culture because of the discrimination they face. And this is shifting Europe, family, from the inside out. It's something they can't control. And sadly, or whatever, you make your decision about that. A lot of our young African brothers, after they've made their money or after they get into these situations, a lot of them just choose to make one last big killing and exit the scene. And they totally, unfortunately, abandon their children in Europe. And the child grows up hearing how their father was so useless and this and that. But there's always that desire to connect with them. But they are their own new tribe. They may not feel 100% African, but they've definitely never been made to feel 100% more European, and they're closer to the African in them. And that is what is shifting up the dynamics now. They have all the citizen rights, all the everything. One day they will be the ones who are becoming presidents and prime ministers. Right now they're becoming the members of parliament and this and that. But this is what is shifting the culture. This is what Babylon, Europe, is really afraid of. Is that these African youths are coming and they're shifting everything from inside out in ways that cannot be controlled. And they try and make it seem that it's about crime and it's about this and it's about that. When that is the furthest thing from the truth. It's about a cultural shift. It's about obliterating certain nationalities and certain races. That's the invasion that's being feared here. But it's like the narrative is falling through their fingers because now the whole world can see the Melilla massacre and situations like that. Before we just hear, our brothers have drowned in the Mediterranean Sea, this has happened, that has happened. But now people are seeing, and Africa is watching and taking notes. But there's a big shift that's happening, that's been happening in the spirit family. And if you're in Babylon, let me know in the comments below, confirm, do you see it? It's like a silent invasion. And many can say, oh, the minds of the Africans who are in Europe right now is like this or it's like that, but they're still so connected to their roots. That's why you have all these African shops that have popped up everywhere, where you can get the dry fish and the this and the that, straight from Africa every week. You see, that's the silent invasion that Europe discusses in the boardrooms and behind the scenes, but that's what they ultimately fear, family. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below. Until next time, tuko pamoja.